Hello and welcome to the Progressive Citizen Report. My name is Brett Banks, and today on the program we're going to be discussing an update with good news from Liberia, a poll of definite young voters that says they are leaning towards a GOP vote, and the Egyptian forces have demolished homes for a buffer zone along the Gaza border. Stay tuned, and we will get this show started. Hello and welcome back to the Progressive Citizen Report. First off, we're going to discuss the Egyptian forces demolishing homes for a buffer zone along the Gaza border. Now, this report comes from New York Times, and it says, one day after an evacuation order, Egyptian army bulldozers began demolishing houses along the border with Gaza on Wednesday. The first step in establishing what officials say will be a buffer zone, intended to stop the passage of militants and weapons across the frontier. The evacuations of hundreds of houses, mainly in the border town of Rafah, started on Tuesday and were part of a sweeping security response by the government of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to months of deadly militant attacks on Egyptian security personnel in the Sinai Peninsula, including the massacre of at least 31 soldiers last week. That assault on Friday was the deadliest on the Egyptian military in years, and a blow to the government, which has claimed to be winning the battle against insurgents. Mr. Sisi, a former general, spoke of a conspiracy facing the state, though prosecutors have not yet named any suspects. The plan to create a security zone around Gaza is not new, but the demolitions on Wednesday amid the hurried evacuations of hundreds of families seem to signal a new determination to expand the scope of the security operations. On Monday, Mr. Sisi issued a decree that placed public facilities such as power stations, bridges, and roads under the protection of the military, and stipulated that crimes against such facilities would be subject to prosecution in military courts. A presidential spokesman said that the decree, which will be in force for 2 years, was needed to protect public utilities from terrorist attacks. Human rights workers, though, saw the law as evidence that the government was seizing on security threats to expand an already suffocating crackdown on dissent. In recent weeks, the authorities have moved forcefully to stamp out protests on university campuses, and on Sunday, Cairo's court sentenced 23 people to 3 years in prison for organizing an unauthorized street protest in June. It is a confirmation of a conviction we had for months, that Egypt is solidifying the rule of the police and the military. Gamal Ed, the head of the Cairo-based Arab Network for Human Rights, said of the decree. The decree, which was issued while Egypt does not have a sitting parliament, also appeared to violate provisions of the Constitution, including a guarantee of fair trials for civilians, rights workers said. Now, there's more to the article. We're going to stop here for a second and discuss. I am not that informed on current Egyptian politics. But what I know is there are many human rights groups worried about this, and the fact that they sentenced 23 people to 3 years in prison just for organizing an unauthorized street protest is very clearly a violation of human rights. What really needs to be discussed, though, is, what implications does this have over in America? Now, they did this under a conspiracy facing the state without any suspects. No prosecutor has named any suspects. That's in regards to the massacre of 31 soldiers, which is a horrible thing that has happened. But the fact that they have demolished homes along the border with Gaza, the fact that they have sentenced 23 people to 3 years in prison for organizing an unauthorized protest is very clear violations of just basic rights. I dearly hope, as I'm sure many people do, that this can be cleared up without another major Egyptian revolution, and through protests. Apparently they're sentencing people to 3 years for a protest, so it's going to take some brave people. But this needs to change. Rights are rights. We'll continue in the article. Even with its greatly expanded security powers, the government has struggled to contain militant movements that have killed hundreds of police officers, soldiers, and other security personnel over the last year. The insurgents, operating mainly in Sinai, have continued to show signs of growing sophistication. The attack on Friday was said to unfold in 2 stages, with militants attacking soldiers who responded to an initial explosion. Afterward, the authorities declared a state of emergency in the area and closed the Gaza Strip's border crossing with Egypt. Officials said that the buffer zone would extend the length of the border with Gaza and reach about 500 yards into Egyptian territory. It remained to be seen whether the buffer zone would have any effect on militant activity, given that the Egyptian authorities had all but sealed off the Gaza Strip over the last year, by severely limiting traffic over the border and aggressively demolishing smuggling tunnels. Residents said the evacuations would likely fuel resentment in Sinai, a region that has historically been marginalized by Egyptian leaders and that has been the scene over the last year of an intensifying armed conflict. Mustafa Singer, a journalist based in Sinai who was near the border on Wednesday, said that while residents had met with officials in recent weeks to discuss compensation, the evacuation order on Tuesday, delivered over megaphones, took people by surprise. On Wednesday, families could have been seen traveling in trucks loaded with furniture away with the border. From the border. There is no confusion difficulty in finding moving trucks, limited time, no places ready as alternatives to move into, he said. The residents he had spoken to considered the evacuation group punishment, he said. The attack could be from outside the borders, from inside, from the governorates. Who knows? It is entirely baffling that there were people who did not know and were taken by surprise. I understand, as it says, that some people were compensated, but there was confusion, as it says, difficulty in finding moving trucks, limited time, no places ready as alternatives to move into. It's just entirely a complicated situation. I'm not too versed in my Egyptian politics. I am, however, aware of who Mustafa Singer or Singer is, but this needs to be taken and thought out more thoroughly, with the people's voice being a factor. That's a New York Times article. I'll link that in the description as always. The next thing we're going to discuss after the break is the recent Harvard University poll that contained a surprising finding. Slightly more than half of young Americans who say they will definitely be voting in the midterm elections would prefer a Republican-controlled Congress. Alright, so we are definitely going to discuss that, and I will be right back. And we're back. A new poll from the Institute of Politics at Harvard University contains a surprising finding. Slightly more than half of young Americans who say they will definitely be voting in the midterm elections would prefer a Republican-controlled Congress. So-called millennial voters, those ages 18 to 29, have been big backers of Democrats since 2004 and helped put President Obama in office. In 2010, the last time Harvard polled young voters before a midterm election, 55% of those very likely to vote favored a Democratic Congress, while 43% preferred Republican control. The new survey released Wednesday found a preference for Republican control among very likely voters, 51% to 47%. The Institute's polling director, John Della Volpe, said the findings suggest that the youth may now be up for grabs. The period of time from 2004 to 2012, where Democrats maintained a significant margin of young voters, appear to be over, Mr. Della Volpe said. The youth vote is now returning back to pre-2004 levels, where it is actually a key swing vote. The survey of 2,029 adults aged 18 to 29 was conducted between September 26th and October 9th, and has a margin of sampling error of plus or minus 3 percentage points. Before Republicans get too excited, though, they might look at the overall preferences of young Americans. When those who do not vote are taken into account, 50% prefer that Democrats control Congress, while 43% prefer that Republicans do. Now, the reason this article surprised me is that generally, like it says, from 2004 to 2012, it was just hands down Democratic vote. But the reason I really like this article is it shows how important getting people out to vote is. We need to get everyone we can to vote. There are many key elections right now that will determine whether or not the Senate is controlled by Democrats or Republicans. I wanted to take this couple of seconds here to talk about calloutthevote.com. Now, what this is a website where you can sign up and you can be an activist. There are different times for different elections that they just set up, and they call people to try to get them to vote. Now, this is so essential As this New York Times article sums up, that when you take into account those who don't vote, 50% prefer Democrats, while 43% prefer Republicans. It is so essential to get these people out to vote. There are so many key elections that are within the margin of error that if we just get these people out to vote, it will change, and it will be democratic. Please, if you have any shred of time where you are able to be an activist, just make some phone calls. You can do it from your chair you're sitting in right now. Just make that call, and you could be the determinant factor in changing an election for the better. Alright, we're going to take one more break, and we are going to discuss Liberia. We went over that yesterday on how they are the model, kind of bad situation, terrible situation. A new Washington Post article is now saying there is some good news. The World Health Organization says the rate of new cases appears to be slowing down. If you'd be interested in that, please stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. The World Health Organization officials on Wednesday said they see glimmers of hope in Liberia, the epicenter of the Ebola epidemic, with strong evidence that the rate of new cases is declining for the first time since the crisis began. Bruce Aylward, the World Health Organization's Assistant Director General in charge of the operational response, said during a news conference in Geneva that he is both cautiously optimistic and terrified about the news. It's like saying your pet tiger is under control, Aylward said. This is a very, very dangerous disease. He explained that the danger now is that instead of a steady downward trend, we end up with an oscillating trend where the virus goes up and down. Because people let down their guard and areas that were becoming clear of the virus become reinfected. Aylward said the recent decline in new cases is real and is confirmed not only by the scores of empty beds in many clinics, but also by a decrease in laboratory-confirmed cases and in burials. As recently as a week ago, local officials expressed alarm that the virus was spreading exponentially. But Aylward said it appears that the strategies such as tracing and monitoring those who had come into contact with Ebola patients, the adoptions of safe burial practices, and aggressive public awareness campaigns were working. As that report said yesterday, as Nigeria is currently Ebola-free, it comes down to contact tracing and proper quarantines. The important takeaway, he said, is that classic Ebola control strategies can work at scale. World Health Organization officials also released new numbers about the spread of the disease globally. The health organization has confirmed 13,703 confirmed cases so far, up from 9,936 on October 19th. For many weeks now, a truism of the Ebola epidemic is that it moves on virus time while the world moves on bureaucratic time. Now there's a twist on that phenomenon. The virus is shifting locations, fading in some places while flaring in others. And that is challenging global health officials to find a way to be more nimble in their response. The most dramatic change has been in Liberia, where there has been a pronounced drop in officially recorded Ebola cases in recent weeks, even as army soldiers are just now flying in by the hundreds and preparing to build 17 new Ebola treatment units. The U.S. military is focused exclusively on Liberia and on carrying out a mission developed by army planners in Germany in September. On Wednesday, Aylward said that those beds are still absolutely needed and that there were no plans to reduce capacity at this time. He said it's normal for resources to be shuffled around from one hot zone to another as an epidemic spreads, but that it's too soon to let down defenses. These are wily viruses. They are waiting for you to make that kind of mistake, he said. Meanwhile, the epidemic is raging next door in Sierra Leone, with limited signs of abating. Guinea continues to have a high rate of transmission as well, particularly in the capital of Conakry, according to the World Health Organization. Now let's stop there for a minute. It's articles like these that are the truth and are not using... I am just baffled that other articles use such opinionated phrases to scare people. Many of what they are saying, are opinions. Many statements they make are opinions. But they're opinions by people qualified to make those opinions. And even those opinions are necessary to stop panic and to stop ignorance. The deal is even if you take away those opinions, the facts still tell you there is nothing to worry about. If you know anyone who is going insane over Ebola, please, I urge you to show them Nigeria. I urge you to even show them Liberia, which is at the epicenter of the Ebola outbreak. But they are having a decline in infections due to proper quarantining and contact tracing, as I stated yesterday, as the article stated yesterday. The article goes on to say, World Health Organization officials said in a news conference a few weeks ago that without significant progress against the epidemic, there could be 5,000 to 10,000 new cases per week in West Africa by the beginning of December. That dire outlook was consistent with other forecasts by epidemiologists who have warned that there would be catastrophically high numbers of Ebola cases without a robust response. The Post reported Tuesday that the administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development believes the situation has improved in Liberia because there is no longer an exponential increase in new infections, but he framed those remarks cautiously and noted the lack of progress in Sierra Leone. I don't think we've turned the corner, but it's better than exponential growth of new cases, Rajiv Shah, the administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development, told the Washington Post after a recent trip to the region. But, he added, in Sierra Leone, we are not yet seeing the kind of trend shift that we're seeing in Liberia. There's an urgent need to scale up the effort in Sierra Leone. Helen Epstein, a writer specializing in public health who has been in Liberia recently, published an online article Monday in the New York Review of Books, saying that the decline in new cases there is dramatic and suggesting that many Liberians who at first denied the epidemic was real have come to their senses and changed their behavior by avoiding direct physical contact with sick or dead people. This is great news. We see this again and again, sadly, that Liberians and other countries in the region deny diseases' existence, such as HIV and Ebola. It is so great that we have a now sensible region who are coming to their senses and believing the truth. This is another key point. This is a necessary thing. Without the belief in the disease, how can we stop it? But this great news will change things for the better. Okay, the article goes on. But there is still great uncertainty about the possible reach of the virus into remote areas and rainforests where disease surveillance has been limited. The official World Health Organization statistics show minimal progress, and disease modelers continue to be concerned. Hard to know what's really going on, said Joshua McCod, Associate Director for Global Health Policy at the Kaiser Family Foundation. Maybe it's only people looking for good news in an ongoing crisis. Maybe reporting is worse than ever and we just don't have good understanding. Maybe people are staying away from the treatment units and cases aren't being counted, or maybe community behaviors actually have changed in the face of mounting toll to the point where transmission has been reduced. The virus has a history of subsiding, then flaring up again. For example, in Kenema and Calahun districts in Sierra Leone, new cases dropped to zero for several weeks, but then more recently the districts had 23 and 10 cases, respectively, in a single week, the World Health Organization reported. Now, obviously, this is not fantastic news, but it's near it. It's great news. The drop in cases in Liberia, due to proper quarantines and contact tracing, is a start. People believing that Ebola exists is a start. It's the beginning that leads to the end. We, of course, need to give support to Sierra Leone. That is an area we should be in right now. All that the World Health Organization is doing is great. They're raising awareness, helping in the area. Helen Epstein. Her discovery that she published, that people are finally coming to their senses, is fantastic. And the insanity that's still running rampant in this country is as insane as the belief the disease doesn't exist. What needs to happen is a, I guess, factual town meeting in every town. I really don't know what the logical thing to do about illogical people is. They need to be aware. They need to understand there is no threat. Liberia's going down in cases. Nigeria has no cases. Sierra Leone, once we get proper information, proper quarantining, proper contact tracing, I'm sure their Ebola cases will go down. But guys, I think that's it for today. As always, you can check in the description below. All articles I mentioned today will be there. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I post a video every day, Monday through Sunday. They're around 1 hour. differing times as to when I post them, but every day. Also, leave a comment and I will answer it in the next video. Also, if you would like me to discuss an article, post the link below and I will look it over, and it may be the topic of discussion the next day. Thank you guys. Have a great day.